next video is on Marxist feminism, and this is not classical Marxism as such, though it is heavily rooted in it. Basically, Marxist feminism is somewhat intersectional in that it links class-based capitalist oppressions, including class-based oppressions such as the oppression of the working class and the existence of private property to the oppression of women. And basically, they're analysing women's class and work-based oppressions as part of a linked series of impressions, including gender-based oppression under a capitalist patriarchy. Marxist feminists often look at types of work which are ignored by capitalist patriarchal exploitation, including reproductive labour, that is, the having and rearing of children, affective labour, the managing of emotions of others, which many would critique as happening both in the home, the workplace and other social settings, domestic unpaid work, and sexual work, including the various types of sexual labour within relationships, as well as sex work in the traditional sense of paid sex work. And that these are benefits to others which are ignored by economic systems as a form of oppression and exploitation under a capitalist patriarchy. Marx, Engels and Bebel, early Marxist theorists, Karl Marx himself, of course, being the Marxist who kicked it all off. He was the Marx that we talk about. All somewhat considered the role of women, with Engels in particular commenting on the exploitation of women under capitalist systems. However, Marxist and socialist feminists, who are not exactly the same but who share a lot of overlap, have substantially developed the theory beyond early Marxism, as have Marxist mainstream non-feminist Marxists as well. Some critiques of Marxist feminism are that differences in class may lead theorists to ignore similarities of oppressions, so that, an oppression that is shared by all women, whatever their class, may be ignored in relation to focusing more on class-based gendered oppressions, and that the focus on the economic may obscure some forms of oppression which are not linked to work, whether currently recognised under our economic system or which is critiqued as being failure to be recognised. Theorists, and there are many, include relatively mainstream feminists such as Angela Davies, Shulamith Firestone, Sheila Rowbottom, and many, many others. A lot of feminists dabble, and intersectional feminists pick up on ideas of class from the Marxist feminists. Marxist feminist jurisprudence has a lot to say about law and how it reflects our capitalist society and the current economic base of society, which is based in both patriarchy and capitalism. It's based on ideas of historical materialism, which very much look at the relation of production and forces of production with forms of oppression and with forms of exploitation of others, including in the workforce and along gendered lines. Some traditional socialist and Marxist theorists ignore the role of oppressions of women. However, Marxist feminists, of course, would pick up an argument such as even the very early arguments by Engels that explore the status of women as an expression of capitalist patriarchy. That is, for example, that marriage was a way to ensure male control of capitalist property and to pass that property to offspring that they were more certain was their own than would exist in a situation where women had more freedom sexually outside of a system of marriage. And that conceptions of private property actually led to the requiring of certain forms of oppression against women so that male private property holders could have this control over the production of their offspring, and it led to a destruction of original mother rights in Engels' term. Socialist feminists consider and critique a whole bunch of stuff that you probably have heard about in the news, such as the economic value of unpaid work, comparisons of how much unpaid work women do in the home versus how much men do in the home. Very much comes out of the raising of the issue originally by Marxist feminists. The alienation of the fruits of women's labour, including their labouring as mothers, as those who manage social situations at through effective labour, etc. And the commodification of women themselves as a form of property, as objects of male heterosexual desire in media, in capitalism, and in society generally as a part of a capitalist society, that women are a product to be consumed. There are, of course, critiques of Marxist feminists by other feminists, including that it can be essentialist. For example, certain ways of looking at women's labour do not catch the forms of labour of all women, and it can be exclusionary of some women, and it often fails as at the Marxist jurisprudence level. Some would say, as they would say more generally at Marxist feminism, to look at some commonalities. Of course, the counter argument for that is that sometimes there aren't commonalities, and there are particular class-based, gender-based, intersectional oppressions which are eluded by an assumption that all women experience the same oppressions. And the other thing to be aware of is that some classical Marxists tend to assume that the natural role and condition of women is in the home and outside of forms of economic production. And so there can be tension between some more reactionary forms of Marxists and Marxist feminists themselves. So that's Marxist feminist jurisprudence.